Rich Gussenberg,
Here.
Chris Daddy,
Here.
Chuck Neff,
Here.
Dennis Rio,
Here.
Megan Rockwell, here, Gregory Rosenblatt,
Here.
Sarah Stevens Morley, here, Jeff Solon,
Here.
Sean Kimball, Tim Slocum,
Oh, here, if I have to tell everybody. I'm not a
Tony-
member.
Tony Perugini,
I don't get a
We're
vote.
gonna note it anyway.
And,
My hairstyle.
and also our town attorney is here as well.
And did you
And I
know
forgot
Vince?
you. Did I say Vince?
Yeah. Did you know Vince was here also?
I didn't see
Okay.
in
Um,
Marciano.
There you go.
Here.
You have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we are pleased to see that we are each meeting having a few more citizens come, and we've added in a public comment correspondence section to every meeting, every regular meeting. So first of all, Sarah, do we have any correspondence at all?
No.
We do not. Public comments, anyone from the public who wishes to speak to the group?
Hi, Dave Gavin,
Yep.
Energy Commission was here last week. I just wanted to reiterate some of the stuff I said last time, and that's regarding energy and its importance to our future, to really try and focus. One of the things I wanted to talk about was called EUI, which is energy per square foot of building. Typically, our schools run around 50-60%, 60 units. It's arbitrary, but it's BTUs, thousands of BTUs per square foot. The recent contractors that some of them were looking at, actually the Korean outfit, did the Buckley building, and they came in, I think at their post order around 18, which is pretty good. It's probably gold LEED. And we should, when we talk to and we're getting near that phase of talking to architects and construction people, you should actually ask them, or for what kind of goal are you setting for trying to reach theoretically a zero type of structure, one that is that actually at zero EUI. It's zero, in other words, it's making as much or more energy that it's consuming. That's a zero, net zero type of building. I'm not sure we can get there, but we should really be striving to get to the gold LEED. Now, I'm sure Dennis can keep you guys abreast of all that stuff. He's probably well aware of those type of numbers. But something to keep in mind, because energy is just going to keep getting more and more expensive until there's some kind of breakthrough. And the big breakthroughs are maybe still 30, 40 years ago. But, as we develop in better batteries, better solar capture, and ultimately maybe even fusion 50 years from now, we're going to have to wait, and it's going to cost us. So that's important. And the 50-year cost of the building, not just the initial capital inlay, but the cost over the lifespan of the building is very important. That's where you'll recover your capital, many-fold maybe. Okay, so that's from the Energy Commission.
Thank you very much. Anyone else from the public? Tim, you're not gonna say anything?
Yeah, I will. Number one, I have watched with great appreciation many of your meetings that have been on YouTube. Which is pretty impressive, by the way, you're on YouTube. But you're doing a great job. I can see you're gelling as a group. I was very impressed with your last meeting where you actually gelled it down to 4 architects, which meant you were doing a whole lot of homework. And I'm impressed by that because I know a lot of the volunteer work does involve homework, but I don't know that I've ever risen to that level of homework. We never did the budget that fast, so I was very impressed, and I want to say thank you for that. But I would also like to address the Energy Commission statement, only as to my understanding. I know when this project was being developed, energy was not lost in any of that conversation. It's important is obviously mainly as important, if not, it's not as important as the people that are in there teaching it and learning. But the bottom line is, I know too, that there was one LEED built school in the state of Connecticut in the last whatever time. It's in Mansfield, Connecticut. They came up dangerously short. And in our planning, we weren't thinking that we were going to get to that level. And I think because of all of that, and it wasn't in our application that went to the state of Connecticut, it should be understood by all in this room that, hey, whatever we can do better to get us closer to the most energy savings over time, there was no statement that we're running for LEED school production. I mean, there's just no money in the ask for that. And we have to recognize that this committee is charged with doing the best with the dollars we have and not spending necessarily every dollar we have. But in so doing, they have a limited resource, which is huge. So with that, I'll accept, we should all accept your input as important, measured against other realities. That would just be my response at this moment.
Thank you very much.
Now, just to not counter, but to reemphasize, based on some of the stuff I did distribute to people a couple of days ago, you can actually lower your initial costs by striving for energy savings. I mean, it's been documented before.
And that'll be part of our task ahead as we have an architect hired and we're working closely with that architect to do the design.
Right.
So, but we have to stay within that dollar figure.
Yeah, and I was very impressed with your selection of the architect candidates.
Very good. So if there are no other yes, sir. Chris?
Wonder if I could ask a question of our attorney. I remember one of the first meetings, I was bringing up some thoughts I had and about things that from my experience and reading the ED specs, just some minor things. And it was mentioned, and I might misquote, that's why I want to ask, is that our charge here isn't to redesign the ED specs. Someone already did that. And our charge is to make sure that what the previous committee already developed gets built affordably, not to implement design changes and such. So can you tell us that if we were to interview all four architects, and he says, what are you doing for energy? Just to be hypothetical, if they came out and he says, nothing. If that meets the ED specs, what authority do we have to make them implement some other design parameters that were not created by the previous committee that developed the ED specs? Does that make any sense?
Yeah, the educational specification is the programmatical aspect of the project. It's a document that is a key portion of the grant application to the state of Connecticut. You don't have authority to deviate from the ed spec. In terms of, what does the ed spec incorporate by way of energy efficiency, as a matter of state statute, so as a matter of law, the project is required to be performed, designed and built in accordance with a certain standard. So, that's the way it is. High performance building standards is what they're called.
Right.
So that's at a minimum what you're going to get. And high performance building standards is the equivalent of LEED silver. Okay.
Just as a point of fact, I've talked to Dr. Solon about doing a presentation to the group, and it'll probably be in March because he was very held up with budget issues and other things that superintendents do. But on the ed specs, and to take us through that process and for us to walk through the ed specs, because although you've seen them when we first started, we've never really jumped into the details, and we really wanted to get a feel for how the ed specs were designed and take a hard look at what's there. So that's coming up in one of our March meetings. Any other comments? Okay. Next on the agenda, approval of minutes, January 12th, 2023. Do I have a motion to approve? Yep. So the motion is second? Second. All right, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed?
Yeah, I'm abstaining because I wasn't here.
An abstention? We
I
have
guess I was here that day, I'm there. Okay.
3 abstentions.
So Jeff, Chuck, and
Megan.
Megan.
Yeah, that's why it was pushed over to this meeting,
Yeah,
because we didn't have enough.
Sarah. Thank you. Oh,
All righty,
The Sarah table.
Yeah, this-
Absolutely.
minutes of January 26th. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved,
Seconded? Right. Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous.
I'm an abstention.
You're an abstention.
Budget meeting.
Okay. All righty. And the meeting of February 2nd. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded, Jeff. Any discussion on,
Want to change your last name?
is my last name misspelled on that one again?
Got an extra E in the first line.
Oh, yeah. Right.
That's our repeater.
That's been an issue all the way along.
We're gonna just keep doing that every single.
4 years from
They're
now.
gonna think that I was like 4 different people.
You're doing the work of two.
I got multiple votes, multiple names.
We will add a note for correction.
All right, thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Unanimous. Okay, Chairman's report, I don't really have anything specific. I'm gonna add that on every meeting. For instance, I think our next regular meeting, I'm just gonna take a look at the schedule that was put together before the referendum, and so that we keep an eye on that schedule. And right now, we're staying right with that. We're in fine shape. But I'll leave that on there as a regular agenda item, just in case there are discussions, issues that I want to bring to the group. Okay. We have references that we need to be calling. I forwarded to you today something that our attorney had sent. And it's very small. There we go. Okay. And this was sent to us today by Jeff. We were talking last meeting about the calling of references. Of course, we haven't done any reference calling yet. We've called each of the 4 firms. I called the day after our last meeting just to let them know that they were chosen and to let them know that we'd be looking for site visits. We'll get to that in a second. Jeff then sent out the RFP right afterwards, and there's been some back and forth with some emails and things from that. So we haven't done any reference calling. So here are some questions that are possibilities. I'd like you to take a look at that, and then we need to talk about who's going to do that reference calling. I forwarded these potential questions to you today. Need to talk about who's going to do that reference calling and how we'll report that back. Give you a little bit of time to take a look.
So we got the references for everybody now?
Hmm?
We have the references for everybody, that was in
It was in the booklet.
Yeah,
But not all of them are building committee chairmen, some of them are principals.
They had
some of them are-
superintendents, they had, so I personally, there's no reason we have to stick to just the names that they've given us, is there?
No, I recommend the building committee chair because that's gonna be the person that has the most overall experience interacting with the design team. The occupants of the building, they're gonna have comments on the finished product.
Right.
Which are important and some of which you'll get when you do your site visits. But in terms of working for 2 years before the finished product was the finished product, you wanna be able to talk to that building committee chair about all the phases of construction and how the architect performed during pre-construction and throughout the construction phase.
And do you normally have one person do all the reference calling, or do you split up the job among
Split it up.
members of the committee?
You can split it up, that's fine. As long as they all ask the same questions, it's fine.
Would there be any benefit to calling the owner's rep, or not so much?
I mean, the only thing about owners reps is sometimes they have a little bit of bias based on who they're used to working with.
That's why I asked.
How would we identify the building committee chair if it's not the reference they gave us? Call the person they gave us and ask?
You can do that, or you can Google it,
Okay.
because they're all recent projects, all their meeting minutes are all online.
I could call the superintendent, get the name, probably pretty easy too.
And you
Probably
probably
on the
wouldn't
front
hurt to
cover
do
of
a
the
reference
plans.
check with the superintendent.
It's probably on the cover page of the plans too.
Right, yeah.
But it wouldn't hurt to do, call the superintendent, get a referencer, and
Sure.
pick up the name of the building person at the same time.
Yeah.
Any input on the questions, or do these look good as is?
I think I'd like to know, just throwing this out there, if they used, and I'm going to speak for the MEP engineer, if the architect used MEP engineer X for this wonderful project, but that's not the MEP engineer that's on the team here, then the amount of change orders and how great they were, as far as I'm concerned, goes out the window. So I think I'd want to know who, for me, that's a relevant team member, and I don't know if anybody else has any other relevant team members they want to know about. But for me, I look around a room in here and it's all that MEP engineer, and I'm not minimizing any of the other engineers, but it seems like all the change orders as you're going through the construction seems to come.
Mechanical's a big deal.
I'm glad you didn't say electrical.
But that would be a good question for the interview.
Oh, I'm not letting that one get away yet.
I will have a conversation with you about the project I worked on in Middlebury. I had a lot of electrical problems there.
Well, I didn't
But
work
it
on
wasn't your
Middlebury,
firm.
so.
It wasn't your firm.
It wasn't me.
All right, any other comments on the questions?
I mean, I see this more as a conversation rather than a list of questions,
Yeah, I mean,
as long as we report it.
you want to make sure that you cover the same things. How you get there, it is a conversation. It's not, sometimes you have to go off script to get them. And once they start talking, you have to kind of do a little course correction. Because, building committee chair, after living through a project, has a lot of feelings, good and bad, about a project. So the idea, that's why when I draft this, that's why I identify the goals and the strategy for the questions. The individual questions, as long as you achieve those goals, doesn't really matter that you ask the same question, as long as you cover the same topics.
So is there a way, and I'm looking at number 5 at the very bottom, and maybe this we say satisfies what I'm concerned about in my head here, but is there a way to find out that, when change orders come in, if it's not right, are they fighting on our behalf and fighting with the construction teams? I'm not anti-construction team, that sounds it, but I'm not. But, something comes in, hey, that was in the plans, are they fighting that battle before it gets to us? And I don't know how to ask that, to say, hey, look, really, maybe you're not making friends with them. That's not the job. You're working for us.
How do you hold the construction team accountable to the plans? Is that like basically the heart of the question?
No. If a change comes in and they're like, well, we couldn't figure this out, so here's another $50,000 change because it took us more time, somebody to go to town and say, well, hold on, it was your job to figure it out. And all that fighting and back and forth and whatnot isn't coming here every Thursday.
Help me understand, because you have a lot more experience than this than I do. When it gets to the architect, who's bringing it to the architect? The builder, right?
They would submit a PCO, a project
Yeah,
change
change
order,
order.
and say that, and then it gets reviewed, and there's a review process.
By
Okay.
the architect, or is that usually the
By the
first?
design, it goes to, the architect is always going to be there. And then if it's something about, if it's the civil contractor, then the civil engineer would review it. And then it goes to the contractor. And then the commissioning agent and owner's rep typically would have a say. But if it's not, if it's something that's like, well, hey, you already own this, or why did you, or who directed you to do this? Why are we getting this change? Like, well, we needed to. That kind of bickering and fighting and standing up for us and saying, no, that was in the contract. You own that. I want them to do more of the fighting.
Right,
than us
yeah,
doing
yeah,
the
yeah,
fighting.
yeah.
By the
Great.
time it gets
That's
to
what I'm
us,
trying to say.
we want that stuff.
We should just
basically
be,
settled.
I would like to think it would be the architect coming to us and saying, okay, PCO 1, 2, 3, yes, here's some reasons behind it, and we find it to be valid, you
Formulate
should
that
pay
in a
it.
question. How would you formulate that in a question?
I don't know, that's kind of what I was saying. This
Yeah.
is what's in my head, and I don't know if number 5 covers it.
Making the builder accountable, you know,
I don't
can
know.
you give us an example of just a simple, can you give us an example of a time when a change order came through and that you thought was part of the original plan? How did you handle that? Is that
I'll tell you how you ask it. First of all, you want to do it in an interview, because anybody will put any nonsense in response to a written question, and the reference check isn't really the way to do it, right? Because there's essentially 4 areas of conflict that an architect has during the construction phase. One is on PCOs, proposed change orders. Okay, contractually, the architect is the ultimate arbiter of the plans and specs. So if the architect says it's not a change, it's not a change. Okay? Corrective work, defective work, non-compliant work. Those are the 4 areas, right? The architect has an obligation to reject defective work. The architect has an obligation to reject non-compliant work. The architect has an obligation to inspect and approve or reject corrective work. That's where the battles are, right? They get pressured on the PCO to move the job along, right? They're in the field office, they're in the trailer, they're getting pressure from the CM, they're getting pressure from the subs, they're getting pressure everywhere. So how do you handle that? You know, rejecting defective work. You know, a lot of stuff happens on a large project. I mean, I have a project right now. It's an 80,000 square foot school. It's not a big school. It's got 1,300 punch list items heading to 2,000. Okay? And a lot of those items are not punch list items. They are defective work items that should have been rejected by the architect during the job. But either the architect got pushback or just kind of looked at them on an individual basis and said, it's not a big deal, I'll let it go. It's not a big deal, I'll let it go. So really, you know, what's your strategy? What's your approach? What's your success level in managing, on behalf of the project, on behalf of the owner, conflicts regarding PCOs, defective work, non-compliant work, and corrective work? And then you want to hear the principal architect respond to that, because that's who ultimately has to fight those fights. And a big part of it, quite frankly, is the owner. You know, because the architect can only do so much. The owner has the architect doesn't have a contract with the construction manager or any of the subcontractors. Construction manager holds on the CM at risk, if that's the delivery method that we're going to use here. The CM holds the trade contracts. So, you know, the owner is in privity with the CM, and the CM owes a duty to the owner. So the owner has to back up the architect and support the architect and the design team when they say, no, it's not a change. And, you know, look, we have on any given project, you know, dozens of things we're not going to agree on. And depending on the size of them, some of them you end up in mediation on, others you just resolve at a table together. But the bottom line is we want the architect to do their job and we want to know what their approach is. And I think you find out a lot in the interview just by listening to what comes out of their mouth.
So it's
Just,
more-
that's
more
the way I would-
interview than-
The way I would present an interview is to say, PCOs, effective work, non-compliant work, corrective work, what's your strategy? How do you manage this for the owner to mitigate against all the pressure you're gonna feel? And what can we do to help you?
But in the reference check, you could ask the head of the building committee, you know, did you run into any specific situations that you could share with us where the architect and the CM had a difference of opinion on the quality of work and how did the architect handle that?
Yeah, I mean, look, sometimes it's hard for lay people to know what's really going on because sometimes it's not the architect. Sometimes it is the architect's fault. I mean, you're going to have on any on any project,
Stuff happens.
on any project of any magnitude, the prevailing standard of care is not perfection. Okay, you can have errors and omissions on a project without it being a breach of contract or negligence. You know, there's a lot of debate among construction lawyers about what exactly the highest prevailing standard of care, which is the standard for school construction projects in Connecticut getting a grant. What exactly does that mean? I talked about that once before. It doesn't mean zero. So you could have PCOs that are due to E&Os, and the CM says, you know, we didn't buy this because it wasn't in the plans. And the architect, I mean, I mediate these things. And somebody, you know, I've got one right now that I'm mediating where a site contractor made a claim and the general contractor's position was it was in a structural drawing, right? So the site contractor, now you're asking the site contractor to look at the structural drawings when they're bidding a job, right? Or it was in an elevation drawing. So you do get into these situations where the PCO may be opposed by the design team because they don't agree that it's an E&O. They think it's something that was inferred, or they think it's something that the contractor should have known, and it should have been part of the scope that they bought when they bid the trade package. So that's you get into a little bit of in the weeds, and the building committee, those kinds of discussions usually don't happen between the CM and the architect at a building committee meeting.
Well, and that's the point. I think if you're talking to the head of the building committee, and they had a lot of those things that were coming back to them, and they're caught in the middle of the architect and
They
CM.
definitely want to know that.
I was gonna say, because Chris's point is it doesn't get there. So even when you ask in the best case scenario, it doesn't get to the building committee. So they may not even know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
But,
one of two
I
things
guess
is
that's a
happening.
good sign too.
Whoever you
What
Either-
are you talking about?
Either the
It's a great
CM
sign.
isn't quite doing their job
Yeah.
right, or the architect didn't do their job because the plans weren't clear or weren't complete enough.
Whoever you pick, okay, of the architectural firms that you've shortlisted and eventually the CM firms and then the owner's rep, we'll have a project kickoff meeting
Mhm.
and in which we will lay down some basic rules. One of the top rules is don't bring problems without solutions to the building committee.
Yeah.
Don't do it. If we start hearing beep, 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 the sound that a truck makes when it's backing up to dump something on you, we're gonna have a big problem. So that's expectation management in terms of the team.
Yeah.
You know, you're gonna be paying these folks a lot of money.
Yeah, you can be sitting there for hours trying to
You're paying them for their
get
expertise.
caught in the middle of arguments
Right.
between your various people.
Exactly.
All right, anything else on these? So then the next question is who's going to do the calling? And looking around the table to ask if anybody is excited about getting on the phone and making a few phone calls.
Yeah.
I'll make
I
a
can
few.
do so.
Yeah, I'll call like one group.
You want to pick a particular architect?
No.
I'll just assign
Yeah,
you.
just assign one,
All right.
right.
Make sure it's
You got
women
JCJ,
Okay.
all right,
Just pick one.
all right. Tecton,
I can call one.
okay.
Who should I get?
TSKP,
When does it need to be done by?
about a week, no, a week and a half. It'll be our next meeting. We would want to report on that. But basically, we need to know when we go in to do the interviews, which is February 28th, March 1st. So there's time there. And you're talking about what would you normally call, what, 2, 3 different jobs for each architect?
3 would be fabulous. If it's 2, so be it.
So you're talking at least a couple of calls. If you're talking to the building chairman, and we may get some other information. For instance, Jeff may be talking to superintendents that he'll add in also. Did you get any other volunteers? Otherwise, I'll tell you. I'm going to California next week, but I'll be sitting around. I can call from California.
Sunny.
Well, it was very warm there today when I talked to my daughter-in-law. It's just getting cold next week. So I'll take Slam then.
On JCJ, only one is the building committee chairperson. So on the other jobs, either we look or they listed magnet reference coach. I don't know, someone call them and say who was the building chairperson?
Yeah, you'd need to, I don't know what, I don't have the booklet in front of me, so I don't.
Which one? That's the JC.
I'm sure the architect's principal contact would be more than happy to get you anything you're asking
Yeah.
for.
Yeah, I was
Just call the name there and say,
I
here's
was
what
just
I-
sending
Call
an
them up
email
and say,
saying, give
yeah.
me the building chair contact info for these 3.
Right.
And if you need me to, send an email out to the head of the company, any of our architectural firms or anything,
Right.
let me know. I'll be more than glad. I can
Great.
shoot them an email. I'm sure they would shoot it right back if we just said, give us the name of the,
Right.
so whatever
Email me-
information you need.
Okay.
Use
Should
me.
go through you.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, go through me,
Mhm.
and I'll be glad to get to them and get you the information you
Good.
need. Okay, so you should get down to basically just having to make, a couple of phone calls, go through, have a conversation, push them a little bit. I'm hoping with the kind of firms we're dealing with here, you're gonna hear lots of positive stuff. Okay, all set on the reference calls then. Did you make any changes on the form here? I see you're
No.
typing like crazy. Okay, so the form we have in front of us is the form
On the
we're gonna
questions, yes,
use. Okay,
I made minor corrections.
okay.
Thank
All right. Site visits. We've heard back from 3 of the companies. I had called them the day after our last meeting. And I said, please schedule the meetings and get back to me. None of them actually scheduled the meetings. They came back to us with the names of some schools and said, let us know when you want to come. I haven't heard back from SLAM. JCJ, let's see, I messed up the order here, but TSKP had Tokanek School in Darien and New Lebanon School in Greenwich. Those were the 2 that they were looking at. Tecton was looking at Candlewood Lake Elementary School in Brookfield and Oxford Middle School in Oxford. And they actually sent a fairly detailed reason why they picked the various schools and how they connected to our particular projects.
Are they happy? Are we happy with the middle school, or would we prefer to elementary schools?
When I spoke to them, I originally asked them for 2 elementary schools. They came back with Oxford Middle School. What he's written here, let's see, Oxford similarities. New construction on an occupied campus, similar building size and student population. Building replaced and consolidated several small school buildings in the district. Possible ledge rock excavation, drilling and blasting, challenging topography and grade changes. This is how it's would fit in with the Norton site, he says. Building incorporated middle school education pedagogy similar to your educational specs for 6th grade. Careful consideration was given to travel among classrooms to different instructional area activities. Placement of core spaces to allow for community use, compartmentalization of building for both passive security measures and definition of grade level communities with access to the shared specials, art, music, and gym. And then he says, at similarities to the north end, new construction on a greenfield site, slightly smaller building size and student population, considerable grade change from front to rear site, existing wetlands considerations and required connections to existing sanitary septic systems, development of comprehensive strategy for stormwater collection is required as part of this new development, the consideration for the North End Elementary site, deliberate focus on integrating specialized ed spaces with the media center hub of the building to promote inclusion, support, and awareness. Building plan was arranged to support a team-based approach for assessment and delivery, similar to your ed specs. Creation of defined learning communities allowed for the creation of middle school environment. He did the same with the elementary school, but the point there was that he was making a connection between, here's why I picked Oxford Middle School. So I don't know, after reading that, as I said, sounds like it would be an interesting site visit to make. But
Pretty compelling case you made in like all the bullet points there, especially for the north end one.
Yeah.
The grade changes.
Yeah, so even though I asked him for 2 elementary schools, after I read this, I said, I wouldn't mind going to see that and taking a look at what they did. So that's tech done. And then JCJ at Birch Grove Primary School in Tallinn and Barack Obama Magnet University School in New Haven. And I haven't heard back from SLAM. You didn't get anything from them,
I
did you?
did not.
No. So I had spoken to them last Friday, and they had said to me they'd get back to me at the beginning of the week. I have to call them again and find out what the story is there. So it appears, since they've given us schools, they haven't given us dates. So I think what I need to do is to find out from you what are some good days and times, and then just get back to them and say, look, here's a couple of days and times that we can come out there. The one that jumped out at me is Darien and Greenwich. I don't want to go there at 4 in the afternoon. So
You wanna go there at 4, you don't wanna come back.
I mean, traffic is, horrendous there. So that would have to be like a midday thing or a very late thing or something.
10
Are
p.m.
we trying to split these up amongst people so it wasn't an official meeting too?
Yeah, well, that's why I was going to ask. I figured, we can just ask for volunteers. If we ended up with more than 4 people, I suppose I can just post it as a meeting. But we had always looked at having teams of about 4 go take a look, come back and report back to us at our next meeting. So let's take a look at the calendars and let's get some dates first of all.
I'm in New Haven every single day, so I would be happy to visit Barack Obama Magnet.
Okay, so we have, let's see if I can. Okay, I don't know what I did there. We're in August 22. I don't want to do that. We don't want to do that.
We have so much more time to do the site visits.
All right, so we've got the week of the 13th, which is next week. As I said, I won't be here, but the week of the 20th. The 20th is President's Day. Some of the schools, I assume, are on vacation that week.
Close that week, so we
Yeah.
can look at Google it real quick.
And it may not be a bad thing to go while the schools are closed if, they have access.
That's probably ideal.
Yeah, I don't know if the principal or somebody would be there.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, if the architect can make arrangements for us to get into the building and walk us through, that's all we really need. We don't care if the principal's there. And then it would be nice if we
It's
could
nice to
get,
hear though.
Yeah.
From the principal who's like, yeah, this is a
this
nightmare.
works or this doesn't
Right.
work,
Yeah. In
Yeah.
practice, it's a nightmare.
And that's where you find
Great
things like,
theory.
bus pickup and things like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
And it would be nice if we could get them all in by the 23rd, so that on the evening of the 23rd, we can report back on what we've seen. And I was thinking maybe as you go through to even take some pictures that you could share with the group. Not a lot. We don't need 50 pictures per school, but if you had a few pictures that highlighted, some ideas there. So what are your schedules look like?
So, Rich, I'm just going to reiterate that
Yeah, you're not available until.
I'm gonna be off the list unless there's an evening one and you're looking for somebody else. I'd love to go, but I'm a 9 to 5er, so I can't go to a midday one.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
We do it afternoons.
Well, that's up to us. I mean, I could give them both a daytime and an evening and see what works out. I don't know what everyone's schedule are, you know.
I have a class every Tuesday from 9:30 till noon.
Okay,
So I might design.
but
class.
other than that, you're
Other
okay.
than that, I'm open. During the days, I can move my work schedule around, change which days I go into the office, and then nights I just need to be able to arrange to see if the babysitter's available.
Okay.
So
I'm gonna be gone the 16th to the 20th, but I don't mind doing the Fairfield County ones. If we could do like early in the morning, it'd be better.
16th to the 20th.
Yeah, but I'll do them next week.
Okay.
I
But
can
other
do the
than that, you're
17th.
available.
Yeah, I can be available.
And you can be
for-
available during the day.
Yeah, I just gotta know about it.
You're not available 16th through the 20th?
16th through the 20th,
Not
Thursday,
available.
Friday, and Monday.
Not available 16th to the 20th. Greg, what's your schedule look like?
I'm available 15th through 17th, 21st through 24th. On the
Say it again.
Okay,
15th through.
Wednesday, the 15th through Friday, the 17th, I'm available anytime. The next week, Tuesday, the 21st through Friday, the 24th, anytime.
Okay.
On the 2 Mondays, if it's early, as long as I'm back by like 4 o'clock, I could probably do it.
Well, that's right. You've got the
I
Monday.
got the class at 6, so
Yeah.
as long as I'm back by 4, I can do Mondays also.
Okay. So we're not sending you to Greenwich at 4 o'clock.
Right.
Okay. Sarah?
So Tuesdays and Thursdays are no-goes for me, 'cause those are my teaching days. And Monday afternoons I can't do either.
Just going off of memory, it looks like the 15th we can get like 3 people to one.
Oh, except I can't do anything on the 15th.
Except
Dennis?
I can do afternoon of the 14th. I can do all day on Friday the 17th.
17, all day?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can do Monday the 20th, but that's a holiday,
Yeah, I don't think we'll be able to get into any of the schools on the 20th.
and I can do all day on the 24th.
24th? Okay, I'm hoping to get them in before the 24th. But we don't have to. We're not doing the interviews until the week after that.
This might sound crazy, but if for some reason they want to do one on a weekend, I'd be more than happy to. That I can do.
Same.
Second.
Okay, so weekends are okay for
Yeah.
people?
not I.
All right, so what I will do is I will contact each of the 3 or each of the 4. Give them some dates and times, send it out to you. You'll let me know who's interested in attending to each one, okay? And we'll hopefully get those going in the next week.
Rich, I could probably, I could make it work most days next week,
Oh, yeah, I didn't ask you.
except for the 17th in the afternoon.
Okay,
Stuff
so which day, the 17th not?
is bad, yeah.
Okay,
That afternoon is bad.
13th through the 16th. And what about the next week? Are you away?
I just
I don't know, check,
committed to something on the 22nd today. The 23rd I can't do. 24th, I could bag what I have in the morning. I just have to be back by 3
Okay.
on the 24th.
Good. I'm hoping I can get to a couple. We'll see how many end up being next week. All right. Any other questions or concerns there? As I said, you know, we've talked a lot about what we're looking for. You know, you got a feel for what the buildings are like, an opportunity, hopefully, to walk through with an architect and get a feel for some of the staff that we'll be working with, and looking at some of the educational. That's why I want to be there as an ex-principal. I got a good feel for what's there, but I don't know if I'll get into it. All righty. Architects RFP evaluation instrument. Chuck.
Yeah,
Chuck has become our guru on evaluations.
try. Who's sharing the screen?
Oh, that's me right now.
Go ahead and just open up, there's a Google sheet called AE Firm Best Value Evaluation Form.
Oops. And where is it?
Go to shared. with me.
Evaluation tools?
Go to shared with me on the left. And you can just search it if you want up at the top.
What's it called?
A/E.
No recent items.
Make sure it's shared.
It's BURG.
CUSS, BERG.
It's on there. I'll just try and share it again.
AE Trust, no, that's contract.
Should I just present it there or not? Or I need the cable. The
Will this reach you?
Cable it is.
cable it is.
I'm
Do you
gonna
have
have to move,
HDMI
you're gonna have to move.
No, I don't have that in.
Through HDMI
No.
down there.
USB-C.
Oh, can that, yeah, that can plug in right over where
I'll
it is.
just email it to you, Richard.
Okay, all right,
There we
plug
go.
that back in there, Jeff.
Let's see if we have a longer cord.
Oh, there it is.
Okay,
All right.
walk me through.
So big picture, this is all best value. So we're taking two components, like the interview process and all the information that we have on the firms. That's one part of the puzzle. And then the cost is another part of the puzzle. So we're not just taking the cheapest firm or the most expensive firm or whoever we decide we like the best. We got to do a similar evaluation process of the firms. So the criteria we can come up with, the weight that we put on them relative to one another, we can come up with. The first thing that we gotta really look at is if you go to the proposed cost, and I just filled in something, go to the proposed cost tab. You gotta determine what weight you're gonna put on the cost of the project. So the cost is gonna carry, how much are we weighing that versus how much, we're impressed by the firm or whatever we're evaluating the firm on. So, right now I just have a weight in there of like say 35, 35% based on the cost and 65 based on our evaluation of the firms. And, when you get the proposed costs, you're really taking we'll get all the costs in there for each of the firms and you're judging them against the high and the low there. So, obviously the lowest cost is going to have the full 35 score. And everybody's weighted against that. And then if you go to the present,
When we do the costs,
Mhm.
we're gonna end up getting three numbers from each firm. How much it would cost to do Norton, how much it would cost to North End, how much it would cost if they got both schools.
correct, you're gonna have to do the cost part of it for it, because the evaluation isn't gonna change, the interview's not gonna change.
Right,
You'd have to do the cost for all three parts of that, and you'll have a best value for Norton, you'll have a best value for the North End Elementary School, and you'll have a best value for whatever the
Combined.
combined is.
right.
And that's where we determine if we're gonna wanna do, you wanna split them up, you wanna do the two of them.
But that would all be on one form.
Well, you'd have three different cost scores that you'd have to add to the interview process.
Okay.
But it's just a first, second, third, fourth place?
It's first, second, third, fourth, but it's all based on like the variance. So say there was a number in there that was like, astronomical.
An outlier.
compared to the rest. Yeah, like if this was 140, the other scores don't get docked, accordingly to it. Like 94 is still pretty comparative, or 88's comparative to the 84 versus like the 140's at a 21. So it's all based on the weights and the
It's all proportionate.
Yeah.
Like, and it's not just a straight gradation
correct. Yeah, it's not
like
like
we
you just
did for the other one. It's just straight.
yeah, you're not just giving it like a, the top's getting a 35, then a
Yeah,
25, and a
right,
20,
yeah,
because
yeah.
you'll just kind of mess up the evaluation criteria that you have. So
Smart.
that's all taken from the it's like an AGC standard for Association of General Contractors of how they kind of use the best value. So it's pretty common. The presentation part is where we have a little bit more the criteria that we develop here. I had just kind of taken some of the line items from the form that Jeff had shared, kind of put a little spin and a weight on it, and the weights are all relative to one another. So because on the sheet right now we have the cost set to 35, the evaluation part of this is out of 65. So that's what that weighted score is at the bottom. Max you could get would be a 65. You can see based on however we'd evaluate those firms, you come up with the go to the actual presentation tab there.
This one?
Yep. So this would be like the form we'd fill out, similar to what we did on the form where you're really ranking it like 1 through 5. We can use the same scale, poor to great. And then the weights, the 15, 25, 10, 5, that's what we can come up with here. And also the criteria on the left. Like I said, I just kind of took a stab.
Right, yeah.
So is the cost worth 35% of their score?
The cost is worth 35% of the final score, yeah.
And they,
Up to 35%
This
for the
is the-
lowest, and this is worth 65.
My opinion, that's way too high.
Which
cost factor.
Factor. I think the firm that we're looking for is a firm that has good chemistry within the team and with us. The cost to some degree has weight, but not a third of the weight. I would say a quarter, maybe. Actually, my opinion would be less.
You're trying to be reasonable, right?
I have a bias.
Yeah.
Because we could have a firm that really wows us in terms of these people really work well together, that gets skewed because of their fee.
When you're talking about a firm that's going to work well with us, where's that fitting in on the description?
It doesn't.
Well, we
it's
have
not-
to create the, I
Right.
think we, as Chuck acknowledged, these are reflective of the last evaluation we did, not necessarily, because I think these should be reflective of the areas that we're asking the questions about. But ultimately, I think the question on the table right now is what percentage of the overall score should be attributed to cost versus capacity,
or versus
fit,
team interaction.
Yeah, and I agree with you. If we find a firm that we think is going to design the kind of school we want, that we can work well with, they may not be the lowest cost firm. And if it costs us a little bit more to get a firm that's going to do the job well the way we want it, I would rather focus there.
Well, what you're describing would only be an issue if it was at a
Right.
50-50. You're already weighing it, half as much extra for the evaluation part of it. If you go too low on the cost, you can get somebody that blows you away, but their cost is 20 million higher. It could still be in their favor because you had the cost portion so low, and that's not. That's opposite of what you want to do.
Yeah, that's
Where the value comes
Well, the
in.
other-
You're weighing it extra, right?
the other, I guess, guardrail that you have in the way that it was designed is what you were just explaining about the proportionate relativity of the weighting. Highest cost doesn't get 5 points, second highest gets 10 points, like something like that. Because of the proportional relationship, it does protect us a little bit from low bid just winning out. Because low bid doesn't automatically blow away everybody else. in terms of the scoring.
So is this just an internal tool for us, or is this like it was in the last meeting where the final numbers are final numbers and that's who we have to go with?
Final number's a final number.
So,
So
what we could do with the scoring of the firm, everything's done before you open any of the pricing part of it. You can't let that play in. But when you're evaluating the firm, we could do our own ratings of it just as we did last time. And we can discuss it ahead of time and come up with a final rating for the firm amongst the team. And that could be the average. You could take
So
a
a
title,
collective,
a collective score.
yeah, okay.
And then that would be
Yeah.
the score for the firm that the group gave to them. And that would be their final presentation score. There wouldn't be the individual ones, but we would have to get there in a similar means to how we got there last time.
Sure.
Everybody kind of contributes.
Jeff, does that,
I would also,
wait 1 second, Jeff, is that,
The process should be, and I think this is what Chuck is saying, is that after you conduct the interviews, you do the presentation scoring for each of the 4 firms, you come up with whatever your final presentation score is, then you open the fee proposals and those numbers just get plugged in based on highest to lowest.
Yes.
but when the state wants to see our evaluation, are they gonna wanna see how each person evaluated it?
Yeah, we
Or
need
they-
we need each person to evaluate.
So you need individual and not a collective rating.
But there's nothing that says we finished interviewing group number 1, we can have a conversation. We rate them, we do the 4 interviews, we have a conversation, and people have an opportunity to go back and adjust their numbers if they choose. Then we open up. Would that-
Well, I mean, yeah, it's up to you. You can either score after each interview, or you can wait until all the interviews are done to score. You just can't open the fee proposals until after you've scored all 4 firms on presentation.
So as a group, we can have a conversation
Sure,
before individuals do their scoring.
sure. Before they do their scoring.
Right.
Yeah, right.
so my only thought on the weighting of the costs, I'm just here asking questions because I don't know what the standards are, is if you got 2 firms, I mean, what if all the numbers are really close? And then it's almost negligible, but someone's getting they're out 4 decimal places before the difference. So it's, 0.00001% difference from the next guy. But that's going to push him over because
Yeah, but the way he did it,
It
the
won't.
scores will be so close because of the way that if you show the
Yeah, go back to the proposed cost tab and I'll just show you. If you did
plug in
Some
different
numbers
the
numbers.
two low people and you had, this guy was like 84.5. I mean, your number's like 35 and 34.83. It's 0.17 on a 100 scale. That's nothing. What's going to push them over is how they did in the presentation, part, which is what you want.
Which owns 65% of the actual weight at the end of the day.
If you just look at the way I have it, I just ran through and did rough numbers to see how it would play out. But on the presentation right now, if you go to the presentation weighted scale, Firm D had the highest score, 60.27. That's you.
Where am I going? Okay.
That's your cue.
I'm looking up here. I'm going back to this one?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, everybody scored them. We came up with the weighted score. It's 60.27 out of the 65 that's available right there. If you go to the proposed cost, though, they had the worst weighted score of the proposed cost because they're 21 million higher than the lowest, or $21 higher than the lowest on this one, right?
So what does that do?
So if you go to the best value
Best value.
tab, that sums everything up. They come in second because Firm A had a better combined score and price, which is what you're looking for. That's why you do the best value part of it. That's why it's not 50-50.
Right.
So are we doing the presentation vote? Well, let me back into this. So I noticed on our votes for last meeting, some people, whoever they thought was the best or whatever may have gotten all 5s and 100. For other people, their best was only like a 60 because it met criteria. It was a 3 instead of a 5. And, that all washes out if you have all the same highest picks. But it doesn't wash out when there's differences. And then somebody who weighted things with a higher, their 100 outweighs my 65, if you will, even though that was still my favorite. You know, I thought they were the best, but all my others. So should we have some discussions? I mean, this is a pretty important decision. Should we do almost like a preliminary vote, if you will, like we did last time, and then actually really talk about it and really get into the meat of
And that's
things?
what we're actually talking about. So
Yeah.
that instead of like last time where we did it and then Chuck put them all together and then we
Blindly
went from
and
there.
independently.
Yeah, this time we would be doing the interviews. Those are an executive session. You'd be doing whatever scoring you want to do. We'd be discussing it. We would do all four. We'd be discussing it. And then you could make changes as you went along there based on, you know, the conversations we're having and your scoring compared to others, whatever. And then we put it together into a final score. So, you know, basically it becomes a group discussion. And I think, you know, even what happened last time, there were some people who, once we started talking a little bit, say, yeah, I see, you know, I want to make some adjustments to my numbers. So you'd have that opportunity.
Where in the sheet do we separate one school from the other?
So that's what I was saying on as far as the evaluation part of it. If we want to split it up separate, we can. My understanding was the presentations were for both of them, right? So the evaluation part of it shouldn't change. Like, we either like the architect for everything we're looking for there, or you're hitting for it. Where it changes is on the cost part of it. So out of the 65, you know, we end up giving them a weighted score of 57. Well, we're going to have a column that has like the Norton School cost part of it. Then we'll have another one that's going to have the North End cost, and then you're going to have the combined cost. And it's really the best value for all. At some point, we have to decide, though, if we want to award it as individual architects to the schools, or if we want to have one architect for both schools, and then you go with the proposed or the best value of whichever way we pick. We don't have to go one way or another. I mean, I'm all for one architect myself, but we can talk about that later. But you got to pick which way you go, and then that's your best value.
That is something we do need to discuss. We'll also have to assume for that discussion that each architect is, I'm happy if I just get North, and I'm happy if I just get North End, and I'm happy if I get both.
Well, that's what part of the evaluation process will be. I mean, I put it in there actually as one of the categories for the evaluation part is workload and ability to manage two concurrent projects, because I think that should be part of the criteria there. If we did that.
Yeah, I agree. Jeff, this process look okay? to you?
Yeah, I'm just nervous about having one architect for both projects, just be honest with you. I mean, if you've got a principal architect that is in schematic, it's in a design phase, you know, whether it's schematic, whether it's DD, whether it's CD, and then you add two more to the plate,
Well, I think part of our
I'd be very nervous.
Yeah, part of our discussion is going to have to be with when the firms come in. What do the two teams look like, and what kind of work do you have on your table right now? And, you know, and I want to see what the dollars look like. Do we save substantial amount of money? Do we have a good sized firm? I mean, SLAM, when they gave us their proposal, had two totally separate teams. So I think that's a conversation
Yeah.
for us to have.
Because it's not just the architects thinking in terms of the civil and site portion of the work. Norton is not very difficult in that respect, but the North End is.
Yeah. So that's going to be during the interviews. We've got a lot of time to push them on those issues and make sure that they, you know, can really respond adequately that, yes, we have the capability of handling two projects at once. If we end up at the end and we don't have a company that we feel can do that, then we have every right in the world to give it out to two separate firms. And we will have scored and have a sense of who the top two firms are.
I agree with you, but this is an interview. Can you do it? This is an interview, and we're gonna say, can you do it? The word no is not gonna come on, it doesn't matter what you ask them. Can you have it done in a week? You bet. It doesn't matter, they're gonna say yes. And I'm not saying that they're gonna lie to us, but they want the job, they're gonna tell you they're gonna commit all the resources and stuff, and then they do what they have. My only concern with it is that, you know, just from my own experience, I think all of us, when you have a project and it's due a certain date and you're working on it and then something changes and you have to juggle, well, what's going to get juggled if both of them get pushed? Are you going to juggle Norton out of the way to finish the north end to get that deliverable? You know, that's my only concern is we have two of the balls that are being juggled, so you can't really sacrifice one when you've got the two.
No, and that's why if they're going to do two, they really have to have two teams that hopefully are coordinating with one another. One of the positives is, you know, you're going to have similar specs, you're gonna have similar HVAC systems, windows, things like that down the line are gonna make it much easier to maintain and take care of buildings if they're all designed by one firm that's coordinating. But you're gonna have to insist on having two very separate groups that are doing the design work, otherwise, you know, it's not gonna work. So, I mean, my feeling is until I talk to these people, I can't make that judgment. I need to see whether they really can handle that or not. And I know we have a difference of opinion around the table, whether we would like to have two separate firms and what that will entail versus, you know, one that's doing both jobs.
And I think there's some concerns on one end, but then there's other elements that you see a lot of benefit. Like we only have one architect coming to give us updates and fill us in on things, and they answer questions and whatnot. We've only got one. We don't have double that, so there's an efficiency there.
Blessings and curses, right? So I think that's what we have to weigh out, as you're saying, in the interview process. You know, and really think about that.
And that's going to be part of our conversation after we finish all these interviews. Okay. So,
Am I the only one who thinks that cost is too high?
well, I originally had gone with you, but I'm willing to defer to the people around the table who feel that the 35 is appropriate. But
Can we change the weighting later on before we do it, before we make it final? If we think, hey, look, this is getting skewed because of the weighting of the pricing, maybe we ought to adjust it. And
Not
You
during,
can't change it
not
after
during
you see
the
the
process.
I think something, could we look at the weighted for the cost again and just put in some like really wild numbers just to see how it.
The impact is.
Yeah, because I think that's what I also felt 35 was too high. But then I saw how it's coming out very close, and now I'm not worried about it. But if you put one at like 50 and one at 150, and then
Jeff, what's the industry
never
standard
gonna happen.
what's the industry standard for the costs for architect?
what percent?
12?
7.
If you're talking
Yeah,
50 and
for a job-
150, you're talking it
Yeah,
costs us
job this
3
size,
times more
7%.
for
yeah, it's never gonna happen.
So what?
But I mean,
You're
but
probably
7%, you said?
7% of the cost of the work for a job this size. So that puts you at like, you know, somewhere, the range ought to be somewhere between, I'm not saying on camera.
Yeah, let's
In
not
the
get
neighborhood
Should
of
be between $1 million and $1.2 million.
That's
In
why
the
it's
neighborhood.
Let's get the
$100.
numbers up there, $100, $80, you know.
I mean,
So-
honestly though, if you have one that's at 80 and one that was at 100, you know, it's what, 25%
Wildly
higher.
deviant,
That's
yeah.
a lot on an
Yeah.
architect fee. So,
yeah,
and you can see it's only changing 7.
yeah. So
I mean, usually you won't see big variances. You know, you'll see sometimes on the CM side, on general conditions, you could see, you know, 20, 30% difference if somebody wants to staff the job more aggressively, if somebody else wants the job staff it inadequately, you know. But really you don't see for architects, you know, it's going to be pretty tight.
I was just wondering if we wanted to say, okay, we expect this, have that as a baseline.
Now, we expect you to sharpen your pencil because there's 8 other firms that would love to be on the short list.
Just to circle back to the point about having a very clear understanding of what the scale ratings mean. I think a good exercise we might do beforehand is just put some like human readable, like a sentence describing what the number actually means. For instance, like 3 would be, I feel comfortable with this company, and 5 would be like, this would be an amazing company to work with, and 1 would be like, I do not want to work with this company ever. So I think
I agree.
score inflation is a real thing. Different people have different ideas, and
It's a good idea.
Yeah, I had a generic thing which Chuck and I had actually looked at one point, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it gave a description, a little more detailed description, but it was generic in nature. It wasn't as specific as well. I don't know if I can pull that up quickly.
I mean, it doesn't need to be exactly that.
Something more than just good.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. So you have just kind of a more, because a lot of this when we go into the interviews and talking to people is a lot about, the rapport and the feeling. And so sometimes putting a number on that is really challenging.
It's funny, I agree with you, because when we were doing the last one, I had some things that were 5, and then I went back and I really read through it. I was like, oh wait, meets criteria is a 3. Well, man, that's not a 5. They didn't
Right.
totally exceed, so
Right.
dropped it down. Still a good score, but it wasn't. So I agree with you. Some words to say, this is really what it should mean. So
Right. Yeah. Because it is really hard.
Yeah, so this is what Chuck and I had looked at one point. I don't know if it gives you enough or if you want it to be more specific to exactly what we're doing.
I think what you're asking for is more specific to like each category.
A little bit.
Yeah, we can do that.
I mean, this is.
It's got better detail.
Yeah.
But I like the fact that at least on this, at the very least, if they met all the requirements, if they were satisfactory, that's 3. That's not a 5. That's a 3.
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah, the
you
big
go
thing
up
is
from
that
there.
everybody rates it similar, so, I mean, describing it like that might be
Yeah.
better.
Will this work for people?
It worked for me.
Yeah.
Okay. And we'll include that with the evaluation.
Right.
Yeah, that's great.
Kind of like print it out and put it in front of me.
Do you still have it, Chuck? 'Cause I sent it
Yeah,
to you
sure.
way back when. Okay. Otherwise, I can send it to you again.
This is great. Thank you.
We should hold up cards. at
Yeah.
the end of it.
That's great.
4.3.
After each topic, they tell us, just hold
Yeah.
it.
Well, we will need I guess we can do that at
Enough
the
for
next
this
meeting, is to
month.
come up with those descriptions or categories you want to rate it on. So go to the presentation tab there.
Yeah, we, just let me get back in a second.
We have a meeting on the 23rd.
We have a meeting on the 23rd.
Is that the week before the
So,
interview?
yeah, so that's just a few days before.
And that's when you want the interviews back.
The references.
Yes.
Yeah.
The references, yeah.
Well, and I think that the reference calls will inform a little bit more what we want to ask.
Yeah, so we were talking about, talking about the site visits, talking about the references on the 23rd. And then we go into the interviews on the 28th and March 1st. So we should be in really good shape at that point.
Actually, I had the references as one of the weighted criteria too, because we should
Oh.
incorporate that somehow into,
Yeah.
You didn't have reference? Yeah, you
Oh,
had
I do.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're at 5, yeah.
5.
think of it as a relative scale to the other one, so. It could really be a 1 if you think of the other as a 4.
We don't have the site visits in there, is anything.
Yeah, I just kept it as the line at 5, but I can add anything. We can have as many as you want.
Usually the site visits are incorporated into that relevant project experience criteria.
Yeah,
Because, they've given you in their statements of qualifications, they've given you projects that they believe are representative in response to our RFQ. So the site visit is essentially, a twofold endeavor. One is to verify the information that they've given you in their glossy.
Yeah.
The other is a little reconnaissance. Look for some good ideas for your project.
Right, exactly.
Or find out what you
I
want
love
to avoid.
visiting these schools. We did it
Yeah,
with
we've
school
done a bunch of it, yeah.
modernization. We went through a bunch of schools and walked away saying, wow, I love that idea. I don't want to do that. So that's very helpful.
But that's not particular to the architect necessarily. If you're like, well, we want to do this.
No, we're gonna have lots of time sitting with the architect after we pick one and talking about what do we want these schools to look like, and how do they fit in. And it was interesting reading some of the brochures, as some of the people talked about the different sites and how Norton is more of a residential area and the North End is more of a rural area, and how they might design the outside of the buildings to look at. I mean, I found that very interesting. Those are the kind of conversations that we'll be having, and I'm sure some community people want to jump into that also as we start getting into that piece. That's the fun part. I enjoy doing that. All right, are we all set here? You okay, Dennis?
I wanted to,
I'll live.
Okay. Just want to make sure.
I wanted to just touch on one thing that I noticed in a few of the firms. A number of them talked about this being an educational opportunity for the students, the building, the construction. I think that that's something that is absolutely necessary. As somebody that is working in construction right now, it is so hard to find people. And so if we make it mandatory that they have to create some sort of program that they'll bring our students and educate our students towards
Well, they
architecture
particularly
and
talked about it in
design.
Norton, since that's
Yeah,
going to be going on
since
right in the
it'll be
backyard.
happening right there, making it safe for the kids, inspiring them about building. I think that that's just,
Yeah,
that's
when
something
you're
that
building
we
right
need
on
to
site like
have
that, you
in the
gotta-
interview process and as a necessity
Well,
to
you can
when
push
we
about that
choose.
in the
Yeah.
interviews. You know, and you may want to be thinking ahead now to the questions when we're doing these interviews. What exactly do you want to, find out from these people? Start jotting down some ideas.
It's a really great point.
Okay, so if we're all set on that?
I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
I'm trying to drag us out here. But as I'm looking at it and thinking about it, just clarify something for me. So we have overall interview. That's the interview. The references, we don't have anything on yet because we have to call the references. They've discussed already in their packet their workload and ability, and more that they talk about in an interview, that also goes to the interview, right? That's overall interview. Relevant project experience, we already have all that already, so that one is not a new category to grade, and any additional they talk about in the interview goes to overall interview.
Well, I think
and
the
same with firm
relevant-
information, right? So are those not all interview things, or am I missing what the interview category?
Well,
and
I
grading
think
of
the
that is?
relevant experience, it's one thing to read a brochure and another to have them walk in the door in front of you and talk about what they would do with these sites. talk
During the
about-
interview though, but that's what I'm saying, that's
Right.
the interview.
I mean, if that wasn't there, though, you'd be okay with the stuff's on there, right? So I mean, like overall interview, just really.
That's what I'm asking, or is that just wow factor?
I think that's.
No,
that's the
it was
impression,
other
right, the
before,
overall
so that,
impression.
it was additional information on the.
But that is a
video.
wow factor, and I'd like to keep that in there.
Whistles, the,
Why don't we put it as wow factor?
Doesn't sound as professional,
Yeah, the
wow
cat
factor.
drawings, the green cat
But I
drawings
would-
and-
So overall impression then, I guess is what you're saying.
Yeah, something like that. I mean,
Or-
having
or
done a
if,
lot of interviews in my life,
How
there are
dynamic. they are
times when
with
people walk out the door and you say, wow, that knocked my socks off. That was great. And I want to be able to somehow,
Yeah,
note
one thing's
that.
strictly numbers and others.
I think the one thing that's,
I like overall impression,
yeah.
because to me, that's not categories, that's like
Yeah.
the big picture viewpoint, because I'm an engineer, I'm gonna follow 1 + 1 = 2, you tell me that that's just the interview, that's all I'm gonna rate it for, so.
is the team chemistry.
You can add it as well.
Yeah, 'cause I don't want to lose that in the overall impression. I think that's very important.
You want that as a separate item?
If I could.
Sure. Fine with me. I'd say sure. Anyone else out there want to fight him on it?
No, I think that is important.
I'll add it after, because it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can do another new line and.
Thanks.
Be right color.
All right, we
It'd
all
be good to
set?
have the, what does that mean? When we have the other, kind of outline of
Yeah.
what, a little more detail around what these different elements look like on that 1 to 5 scale. Very helpful to have that sort of rubric to.
Yeah, but you did last time a definition for each of those
Yeah.
items.
I essentially stole it from the RFP, but I'll come up with something for it, so
That makes
it's easy enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really two factors. One is the team chemistry amongst themselves in terms of how they work together before and how do they interact. And the other one is the chemistry of the project manager with us. Because once they leave the interview, we're never gonna see a lot of people there. The only person we'll see is the project manager.
Right.
So like a 5 scale would be internal and external chemistry.
Well,
right?
if we
You know,
do
that's what it looked like.
Unless you want to
internal
split it.
chemistry as one
Yeah, I could do 2 line items.
and external, or project manager as another.
Sure, team chemistry and chemistry with the committee. I like that.
Maybe.
I like that a lot.
And then that one, you're only looking at the project manager,
Correct.
because that's the person we're gonna be dealing with on
Yeah.
a regular basis.
Not the principal, not the,
Right. We'll never see the principal again.
This might be super extra, but this is the way I do my rubrics, and I actually write a sentence about. Sorry, this is like the worst way to do it. I apologize. You would know I'm in technology, right? But I actually write like a couple of sentences about what that looks like. I know this is like that's a lot for this, but that's kind of like what I need to do to make sure I'm actually being consistent across all the areas.
This might be the most important decision we make. So
Right.
it's-
I mean, I think that rubric that Chuck had up there kind of speaks to that to a degree. Yours obviously has more gradation.
Yeah.
You know, but
Yours is specific.
something like
You wanna
that.
play-
Yeah,
you wanna-
every single
Yeah.
criteria.
If
Yeah.
if you play with it, come up with
Just
something.
great.
You know, send it to Chuck, I'm sure he
I'll
would be
do, I'll
glad
take
to.
the categories that we have there. I'll put the 1 through 5 on the top. I'll just jot down a little blurb and then I'll share the sheet if you guys want to throw some stuff in there.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. All set? Moving on. All right. Now, believe it or not, just, I'm gonna go over to our calendar for a second. Here we are. The RFP, or RFQ rather, just to move us a little bit, the RFQ for our owner's rep went out on Monday, the 6th. There was an issue, I guess, in some of it. What was
Yeah.
it?
With the newspaper. It
Yeah.
got posted on DAS. I guess it didn't pull something when they ran it in the newspaper, but it did run the second day.
Yeah, so the 6th and then the 7th. And then that information is coming in on the 26th. So we're rolling 2 different things at the same time here. So not to make our heads explode, but just as, so that everyone is aware, you know, we'll be getting through all the architectural interviews, hopefully making a decision, getting that over to the town council. And at the same time, we're going to, as of March 8th, we'll be getting information in there, and we'll go through the same process again, where we have a week to look at whatever recommendations people have made. We have several weeks then, and they come in, and then we do our interviews, April 10th to the 14th, whatever couple days we pick there, and then we'll be making a decision on owner's rep. So that's phase 2 that's coming, but we're trying to phase it so that we've got one basically out of the way before we get to the next one. And then the third one, we need to start moving up, and that's the CM at risk. And so I want to get that piece in front of us today. And between today's meeting and next meeting, I'd really like to get that ready to go out with an RFQ. So you should all have this. And I don't know whether you've had a chance to look at it. I don't believe there's a place in here to put all the dates and stuff that we have done on all the others. You know, I didn't see it when I looked. I was trying to schedule out
We
what
could add
would,
that.
yeah, what would be a good time for these.
It is in our folder under RFQs, RFPs. There's a folder called Construction Manager.
Mhm.
If you're using your own device right now to look.
So obviously we've got a lot of the same beginning stuff. And then, you know, all the details. So we're gonna want to start going through this, and between this meeting and next meeting, I'd like to get this ready to go. And I'd like to set up some schedules. I put it down here with some which has, in my mind, we were, possibly going out on March 6th with an RFQ, which brings us up to like May 22nd to the 24th for interviews.
March. March, is it May?
March 6th would be when the first RFQ goes out.
Yeah.
And then we go through the whole process, and by the time we get to the interviews, we're out to May 22nd to the
May?
24th. Yeah, it takes us 2 months.
That's too long. It's too long. I'm telling you right now, you want the CM on board before the end of the schematic design phase. Who's gonna do the schematic design cost estimate? The architect? Is it worth anything?
Well, if you're doing the same time schedules, I mean, I suppose you can compress that. But I just looked at what we were doing with the other 2 blocks, the owner's rep and the architect, and how many weeks we're at in between. That's what it took you out into May. And of course, I'm still looking. I know. I was looking at this schedule, which was put together before referendum, and that schedule looks at an architect being hired by June. But I mean, I'm open to whatever schedule we think is doable.
We did the RFQ for the architects on January 9th, right? And we have interviews at the end of February. That's only less than a 2-month time frame.
Almost 2 months. So this was March, April, May.
You have like 2.5, almost 3 there.
Okay. Well, I was
Seems like we could pick up like 2 weeks there.
Well, that would be fine with me, however we want to schedule them. I don't have any, ownership here. I was just looking at
Yeah, trying to
the
schedule.
layout that we did with the owner's rep so that we weren't overlapping too much. But if we can do that even in a more compressed form, that's fine with me. Well, as long as we don't end up, having the 2 come due at the same time.
There's a lot more work for a CM to do during the design phase than there is for an owner's rep.
With the owner's rep, we already have the RFQ out there.
I know, I'm just saying,
Yeah.
in terms of the criticality of who you get on board, the CM really needs to be on board during schematic design.
If we already have a draft of the RFQ, can we not finalize it at the meeting on the 23rd and send it out on the 27th? Because then it'll be out for the 2 weeks that you're doing the interviews and
Right.
reviewing the calls of the owner's rep.
So what dates were you looking at?
Just in general, if we have it right now as a working document, we can review it over the course of this week, next week for the meeting on the 23rd, February 23rd.
Right.
We release the RFQ on the 27th,
Yes.
and then you do the same 2-week time frame.
Yeah, so that, I was looking at March 6th, so you picked up a little over a week there. And we'll try to compress that as much as we can. As I said, my only concern is just don't want to bump into, here's the owner's rep. I just don't want to bump too much into that so that we're dealing with too much at one time.
Yeah.
And then, once we get these 3 groups hired and taken care of, we should get into a whole new phase for this group.
We got a whole bunch of other people that need to get procured, and based on the change in the law a few years ago, they all have to be procured via RFQ, RFP, whereas before, none of them had to.
Okay. Who are the other people?
Commissioning agent, environmental, special inspections, independent materials testing.
Third party.
Yeah,
How many people do you think we could anticipate applying to an owner's rep? I mean, I know architectural firms, there's X number, and we thought 13 would be in the ballpark. It's a high number. We had it was much more intensive sifting through that process than, his owner's rep. Should we expect 13 or 3?
the timing of it kind of creates a little wrinkle because ordinarily you would hire the CM before you'd hire the owner's rep. So firms that were competing for the CM position who didn't get selected, some of them do owner's rep work. So you get some of them bidding. But if I'm a CM, I don't want to be an owner's rep on this job. I want to be a CM. And since you're procuring the owner's rep before you're procuring the CM, I think you'll get fewer responses on the owner's rep side. In terms of, there's firms that are doing owner's rep work who shouldn't be. There's individuals that won't pass the criteria and the qualifications. They'll get DQ'd. They won't make the first cut. Want a prediction? 7.
Okay.
The over
Taking the under.
The over unders 2. The over
Number
unders
is
2.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm
It's-
I'm hoping for 5 then.
There's too many. People think it's, hey, I don't build anything and I don't design anything, and I really don't need a license to be an owner's rep. So why not be an owner's rep?
So we may be able to push that process without killing ourselves.
Yeah,
Going
that's
to-
what I'm thinking.
Going to the 12
Yeah.
or 24, however you want to look at it.
It's much more intensive than this next phase, hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah, my guess is that if you get 7, it may well be that only 4 of them even meet the qualification criteria. And then you're just deciding of those 4 which you want to shortlist.
Okay. So we may end up doing interviews with only 2 or 3 companies.
Yeah, because there's only a few firms that are doing multiple owners rep work of any magnitude on schools in Connecticut right now. Like I said, there's individuals, but we have insurance requirements
Right.
in addition to experience requirements. So
And
they may not meet it.
Okay.
Jeff, what about the other ones that you had mentioned? That's not, you mentioned that all those other consultants we need to hire, special inspector and stuff. Are those the same big 30-page RFQ and then the RFP and the interview and all that, or that's just?
It's the same. The legislature changed the statute to require that all consultants be engaged in the RFQ, RFP process. The RFQs and RFPs for special inspectors, material testing labs, third-party review, LEPs, commissioning agents are a lot shorter because the scope of work is so narrow. You don't have a 5-page scope of work. You have, 5-paragraph scope of work. And then the numbers of firms, I wish, quite frankly, there were more special inspectors and testing labs in Connecticut. I really do, because I run into the same cast of characters over and over again. And the guy from Dimeo in the back is right now laughing because he knows what I'm talking about.
This is a great conversation.
We would love to have 8 testing labs in Connecticut instead of 4. Commissioning agent, you get a lot of your fellow engineering firms. They're doing commissioning work. But again, the real key to that, the whole purpose of the RFQ is for us to identify meaningful criteria that allow us to say, you're not qualified, you don't get to the RFP stage. And there's no remedy for that. It's not like where you go out to bid and you have to award to the lowest responsible qualified bidder, and the apparent low bidder you find not qualified, right? And then they bring a lawsuit and they challenge that. Really, the only time that there's been a challenge to an award to an architect on a school construction project was back in 2007 when 10287 for 50 years, statute 10287 said all the trade contracts have to be bid and they have to be awarded to the lowest qualified responsible bidder. Then in 2007, the legislature came up with the idea that, and this was all a result of things that happened at the state level, not at the municipal level. That, you know what? Architects, construction managers, they should be subject to the low bid too, which was fatally flawed to begin with, because what are they bidding on? There's no project. There's no design document for a CM to bid on. And what is the architect bidding on, right? So they had this process initially that was very, very convoluted, but it was lowest qualified and responsible bidder. And really the only case that was litigated, I was the expert witness. Fletcher Thompson and Silver Petroselli, as a joint venture, bid Trumbull High School under the new statute, the first year after the new statute came out. And the town had an elementary school, Frenchtown, where they had an experience with one of the two joint venture members that was less than positive. So we had the building committee members come to the high school building committee, and we videotaped the meeting where they talked about the problems they had on the job, and I opined that they could disqualify the joint venture. And then Lou Pepe represented Fletcher Thompson. I testified, we got the case dismissed. And then the statute changed because they said it doesn't work. And that's when they said, you don't have to consider, you can consider more than price. You have to consider price, but you can consider all those other criteria that we talked about at the first meeting. But now that entire process is applicable to all the consultants. And so the key is to actually have an RFQ where you identify meaningful criteria in terms of experience on similar projects and expertise, and not being defaulted, and not having bond claims, and not having litigation where they were found liable for errors and omissions and things like that. So that way you don't have to interview all those firms, you know, and really the process does, with respect to the other consultants, does move a lot more quickly.
All right, so I think the best way to do this, rather than go through it as a group, would be to ask everybody over the next few days to read through and to send me any comments that you have. Jeff and I will take a look at the schedule. We're going to try to come through with a compressed schedule so that we can start it on February 27th, hopefully get somebody booked in by mid-April, I guess.
That'd be great.
Okay. And see what we can work out there. Other than that, this was provided to us from our attorney, and so I think, you know, it's pretty complete. We just have to, you know, take care of a few items here and there. So, any questions on that? So you just, between now and, let's say, Tuesday, if you have any issues or questions, and I'll take care of it from California. Anything else on the RFQ for the CM at risk? Any other items that people want to bring up? If not, then I will take a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Chris. Seconded by Dennis. All those in favor? Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Another helpful meeting. Great job.
Sure.
See everybody